The ramp slams down into the water. November 20th, 1943. Betio Island, Tarawa Atoll. The lagoon is shallow, blinding, a sheet of white glare that burns your eyes. The air tastes of salt and diesel. Machine gun fire snaps like tearing cloth. Men spill forward into water that should be at your knees but is suddenly at your chest. You stumble. The pack drags you down. Coral bites through fabric. The heat is already unbearable. Somewhere ahead, beyond the glare, something waits that has been preparing for this moment for months. This is where the myth that courage alone can win a modern war is about to die. For years, the story of American victory has been told as a tale of will, grit, Marines charging into the teeth of fire and carrying the day through raw determination. It is a story built on earlier fights, on islands taken by audacity, on positions cracked by men who refuse to stop. The belief is simple: if you put enough brave men on a beach, they will take it. That reputation now arrives at a strip of coral no wider than a few football fields. The men who come here carry that faith inside them. So do the men waiting in the sand. On Betio, the defenders are certain of something just as powerful. The island has been turned into a fortress of concrete and steel. Bunkers are buried into the ground so deeply that only the gun barrels show. Machine guns are sighted to overlap, each killing zone covering another. Artillery is hidden behind sand and coral, immune to anything but a direct hit. Trenches lace the island like veins. The garrison has been told the truth without ornament: they cannot be rescued. Their duty is not to hold until relief arrives. Their duty is to make the Americans pay in blood until there is no blood left to give. They do not believe they can lose, not because they expect to survive, but because they believe they can make victory meaningless. The boats grind forward. Water hammers the hulls. The sun climbs merciless. The lagoon should have been deep enough to carry the landing craft over the reef. The tide is wrong. Boats stop dead hundreds of yards from the beach. Ramps drop anyway. Men step into open water under open sky. The first bodies hit the surface before the first wave has taken 3 steps. Bullets skip off the water like stones. The noise is constant now. Machine guns, mortars, the distant boom of naval guns that sound impossibly far away. You wade, you push. You try to keep your rifle above the surface. Around you, men disappear. Some fall without a sound. Others scream once and go under. The coral is sharp as broken glass. Every step tears skin. Every second in the open is a coin tossed toward death. This is not how it was supposed to be. On the beach, there is no beach. Only a low wall of sand backed by concrete mouths that never stop spitting. Marines reach the shore in handfuls, collapsing behind the seawall, pressed so close together that the living shield the wounded. The sand is dark with blood almost immediately. Medics crawl forward with no cover, dragging men back by their collars. Radios are soaked. Units are mixed. Officers shout orders that cannot be heard. Smoke hangs low, but it does nothing to hide movement from the gunners who have rehearsed every angle of fire. The first plan dissolves into fragments. The belief that willpower breaks defenses shatters here in the first minutes. It is not a setback. It is a rupture. The enemy has not merely resisted. It has erased the assumptions that brought you to this shoreline. Courage does not close the distance. It only carries you into the line of fire faster. Still, the men push forward because that is what they have been trained to do. Small groups crawl, sprint, dive. They find dead ground where the bullets cannot reach, then discover that the next step is fully exposed. Grenades bounce off concrete and explode harmlessly. Flamethrowers sputter under fire. Tanks try to come ashore and are knocked out almost as soon as they appear, black smoke marking their graves. Each attempt to break through is met by another layer of steel. The defenders do not need to counterattack. They only need to keep shooting. The day drags on. The sun bakes the lagoon into a mirror. Wounded men lie where they fell because no one can reach them. The water around the reef is dotted with bodies and floating gear, the debris of a plan that assumed the sea would be an ally. The sound never stops. There is no lull, no moment when the guns fall quiet. When night finally comes, it does not bring rest. It brings the smell of rot and cordite, the moans of the wounded, the whisper of men trying to crawl forward in the dark. The next morning, the second attempt begins. Naval guns open again, planes dive and scream overhead. The island is pounded until the sand jumps and the palm trunks splinter. From the ships, it must look like annihilation. On the ground, the effect is smaller, colder. Concrete holds. Guns reappear from smoke as soon as the bombardment lifts. Marines advance again, this time with more tanks, more flamethrowers, more demolition charges. The movement is slower now, more deliberate. Men hug the ground. They crawl to the edge of a bunker, slap a charge against the opening, roll away, and feel the concussion through their bones. Sometimes the position goes silent. Sometimes it does not. Progress is measured in yards. Each yard is paid for in blood. The pattern repeats. A new plan, renewed confidence that this time the firepower will be enough. A push. Then the same grinding reality, interlocking fields of fire, bunkers that survive the blast, defenders who keep shooting until they are buried alive. The environment itself becomes an enemy. The heat drains strength. The coral tears at hands and knees. Water is scarce. The wounded grow feverish. Flies gather. The smell of death thickens the air. By the second night, the beachhead is secure in name only. There are pockets of Marines on the island, separated by strongpoints that cannot be bypassed. Supply is chaos. Ammunition arrives in trickles. Medical care is what can be improvised in shell holes. The men are exhausted beyond anything they have known. They have been fighting for hours that feel like days, under a sun that does not forgive, against an enemy that does not retreat. The third day dawns with a clarity that is almost cruel. The lagoon is calm. The sky is empty, and still the guns fire. What is happening on Betio is not simply a battle. It is an exposure. The old faith, that courage, properly applied, can overcome any obstacle, is being tested against a new reality, a defense designed not to be overrun by bravery, but to absorb it. The defenders do not rely on hope or counterattack. They rely on geometry, on concrete, on overlapping arcs of fire that turn open ground into a killing machine. They have built a system that consumes attackers. And the system works. When Marines finally break into the interior of the island, they discover that every bunker is only one node in a web. Destroy one, and another fires into the gap. Clear a trench, and a machine gun opens from behind. The defenders appear from holes in the ground, fire at point-blank range, and vanish again. There is no front line, only a maze of death where every step forward is contested. The cost is staggering. By the end of the third day, thousands of Americans are dead or wounded on an island less than 2 miles long. Entire companies have been cut to pieces. The men who remain no longer talk about victory. They talk about survival. They fight not for flags or objectives, but for the man beside them, for the next 10 feet of ground, for the hope that this will end before there is nothing left to give. The defenders are dying too. They fight until ammunition runs out, then with grenades, then with rifles used as clubs. When bunkers are sealed, men inside burn or suffocate. There is no surrender in any meaningful sense. The orders are absolute. Hold until there is no one left to hold. The garrison is being annihilated, but it is doing exactly what it was built to do, converting American courage into casualties. On the fourth day, the last organized resistance collapses. The final bunkers are reduced. The final shots echo and fade. Betio is taken. Silence follows the violence, heavy and unreal. The guns stop. The wind moves the palm fronds. The water in the lagoon laps against wrecked landing craft. The island is a ruin of shattered concrete, burned timber, and bodies. Men walk through it in a daze, stepping over the dead, searching for the wounded, counting the faces that will never answer again. The numbers are brutal. More than 1,000 Americans are dead. Thousands more are wounded. Nearly the entire Japanese garrison has been killed. The island has been captured, but at a cost that cannot be reconciled with the old story of heroic assault. The victory feels hollow. It feels like standing in the wreckage of something that can never be rebuilt. This is where the collapse deepens, beyond the individual and into the structure of war itself. Tarawa does not fail because men lack courage. They have more than enough. It fails because courage is being asked to do a job it cannot do alone. The assault plan assumed that bombardment would break defenses, that speed would overwhelm resistance, that the enemy would collapse under pressure. Instead, the plan ran headlong into a system designed to negate those very advantages. The tide, the terrain, the engineering of the defenses, the coordination of fire, all of it combined to turn a frontal assault into a slaughter. What broke here was not the spirit of the attackers, it was the doctrine that sent them. Supply chains buckle under the unexpected cost. Medical services are overwhelmed. Command and control frays as units intermix and radios fail. Tanks prove vulnerable. Naval gunfire, so devastating against open targets, proves inadequate against buried concrete. The entire apparatus of the assault, planning, logistics, fire support, reveals gaps that bravery cannot fill. Courage does not clear reefs. Courage does not raise tides. Courage does not crack reinforced concrete by itself. Courage does not move ammunition through a lagoon filled with wreckage. Courage does not coordinate tanks, infantry, engineers, and naval fire into a single, seamless machine. Courage can carry a man forward into fire. It cannot replace the systems that make that forward movement sustainable. On Betio, the Americans learned this in blood. The lesson spreads quickly. Tarawa is not a footnote to be forgotten. It becomes a warning. Every report, every photograph, every list of casualties forces a reckoning. The war in the Pacific cannot be won by charging beaches and hoping the enemy breaks. It must be won by redesigning how assaults are planned, supplied, and executed. The environment must be mastered. The defenses must be understood and neutralized before men are sent forward. Firepower must be integrated, not simply applied. Engineering must lead as much as infantry. Logistics must be treated as a weapon. In the months that follow, the change is visible. Landings are preceded by longer, more precise bombardments. Reconnaissance becomes obsessive. Tides are calculated to the minute. Specialized equipment is developed for obstacles that once went unimagined. Coordination between ships, planes, tanks, and infantry becomes a science. The assault is no longer an act of will alone. It becomes an operation of systems. Tarawa forces this transformation because it makes the cost of ignorance undeniable. The men who survived do not speak of glory. They speak of the heat, the water that turned red around their legs, the sound of bullets on coral, the faces of friends who fell in the open with nowhere to hide. They remember dragging the wounded across sand that burned like iron. They remember the smell of burned flesh inside bunkers. They remember how close the enemy was, how human the killing felt, how small the island seemed compared to the scale of the loss. For the defenders, the story is one of absolute sacrifice. They achieve what they were ordered to achieve. They make the Americans pay. But in doing so, they reveal the limits of their own doctrine as well. A defense that requires the death of every man to hold an island for days is not a path to victory in a war of industry and replacement. It is a strategy of annihilation that cannot change the outcome, only the cost. Tarawa exposes both truths at once. It shows the attackers that bravery without system is slaughter. It shows the defenders that sacrifice without sustainability is extinction. From this point forward, the Pacific War is no longer about who is willing to die the most. It becomes about who can integrate firepower, logistics, engineering, and coordination into a machine that can keep moving after the first shock. The islands that follow, Saipan, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, will be bloodier in their own ways, but they will be fought with a different understanding. The assaults will still demand courage. They will always demand courage, but they will not be built on courage alone. What happened on Betio reshapes the future of amphibious warfare. It changes how armies plan, how navies support, how air power is applied. It forces the realization that modern war is not a contest of hearts, but of systems. That the outcome is decided not by who charges hardest on the first day, but by who can design, supply, adapt, and endure. This was not just a battle for a strip of coral. This was the moment when the old belief, that bravery could substitute for preparation, that will could replace coordination, died in the sand. And in its place was born a new reality. Wars are won by those who can turn courage into capability, sacrifice into structure, and human endurance into sustained power. Long after the guns fell silent, the island remained what it had become in those days, a measure of cost, a reminder etched into coral and concrete that heroism, no matter how pure, cannot overcome a system built to destroy it. That the men who went forward into that lagoon did everything asked of them, and more. And that what failed them was not their spirit, but the doctrine that believed spirit was enough. The sun still rises over the atoll. The lagoon still lies flat and blinding. The wind still carries the smell of salt across the reef. But beneath the surface, something fundamental shifted there in November of 1943. An illusion ended. A new understanding took its place. They did not just take an island. They revealed the truth of modern war.